Good evening. 16th Newtownabbey have a long tradition of having a remembrance and acknowledging the sacrifices made by young men, young women and older men and older women during the World Wars. This evening I'm going to spend a little time with you, and it's very significant that the 11th of November this year is on a Wednesday evening. As you see, I collect a lot of artifacts, and my roof space is full of artifacts, and I've just displayed a few here for you to have a wee quick look at, and I'll explain a few things. Often when people went to war, they were given a dog tag. This is a piece of metal with their name and their number that would have been placed around their neck, so as if anything had happened to them during battle, they would have been able to identify those people. Sadly, many people from our wee province of Ulster here lost their lives. Many of them fought in the 36th Ulster Division, at very famous battles. To name one, the Battle of the Somme. If a person was killed in action, their family would have received a little box, and this was addressed to a family on the Laganeel Road, and it was a Mr. Bingham, and his family has passed that on to me. Inside it was the dog tag and the two medals which he would have been awarded for his time serving, and as you can see, they have never been mounted on the thing because he never had the opportunity to wear them. There would also have been a little thing from the Secretary of State explaining what was in the little box. This has been passed to me by the family for safekeeping, which I'm very proud of. Later on, the families would have received a death penalty. Their name of the person would have been inscribed here. This is a man from White Abbey village, and again the family have passed this to me because I know how interested I am about the war. And it says he died for freedom and honour, and this is what the family would have got on the death of their family member. So again, I cherish this. Okay, when the men would have went over the top, say on the 1st of July 1916, their commander would have blown a whistle to signal the attack, and there's a whistle similar to this. It happens to say in this, and it's an army one, 1916. I'm not sure whether it's originally from the war, but it was passed to me as well, so that's a whistle. As I say, I have had the privilege of going to the Somme on a number of occasions with the Boys Brigade. The first time was in 2008 with boys from the company, and later on myself and a few officers went on another date. What an honour and what a privilege to be at the Menin Gate in Yeeks, to lay a wreath on behalf of people who made the supreme sacrifice. We've also been to London on a number of occasions and had the privilege of parading with the Boys Brigade UK and laying a wreath on Remembrance Sunday at the Cenotaph. Hopefully in years to come, when we get clear of this virus, we'll be able to do a few more things. When I was at Somme in 2008, we visited the Ulster Tower in France, and quite a number of the large cemeteries, Island of Ireland, Peace Park, etc. And near where we were staying was Messines, and one day I went into a poppy field because poppies grew just all over the place there, and I picked up poppies and I brought them home and I dried them and I made them into little bookmarks for the boys to keep and cherish, and I still have mine now. There's famous places there like the Pool of Peace near Messines where a large explosion took place, and it's a very serene place where we sprinkled the poppy leaves that I had collected from the Royal Albert Hall. Men who fought with bravery were awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest award that can be given to anyone within the armed forces for a very brave act. You have the military medal, which is for an act of bravery, but this is even above that, the Victoria Cross. Many people from our wee province of Ulster won the Victoria Cross. I'm just going to speak about two. One from the Army, Rifleman Robert Quigg, the 12th Battalion of the Royal Irish Rifles. He lived in Bushmills and he was awarded his VC at Hemel, H-A-M-E-L, and that happened on the 1st of July 1916, which was the Battle of the Somme. He worked in a large private estate round the Bushmills area for a wealthy man, and it was Sir Harry, and they both set off to war, and his wife before they left said, look after each other. So during a battle, Robert would have went out into the battlefield, and he spent 7 hours, went out 7 times lifting the wounded, because he had heard Sir Harry had been shot, and he would have brought back the wounded to be treated at the field hospitals. He later received his Victoria Cross from the King, and the King said to him, Robert Quigg, you are a very brave man. And Robert Quigg's reply to the King was, you are a very brave King. They unveiled a statue, and I have a little memento from that unveiling for Robert Quigg in the Bushmills town centre. So if you're ever in Bushmills, have a look at his statue. It's a life size, and the Queen actually unveiled that statue, and I had the privilege of actually being there at that particular time when it was being unveiled. His grave is also in a churchyard just above the Bushmills, and you can visit that as well, and which I've done on a number of occasions. So that was a brave Ulster man getting awarded the Victoria Cross. Another one, Mr. Bingham, Mr. Edward, and he was a commander of a Royal Navy frigate. He lived in County Down area, and many battles were fought on land and at sea, and the sea battles were just as important to the British as against the Germans as battles out in the field were. And most of the ships sailed out of Scotland, ports in Scotland, to fight in the North Sea and other places. He was in a frigate, and he was torpedoed, and he was taken as a prisoner of war, and he spent his time as a prisoner of war, and he was awarded the VC for his actions on the 31st of May, again in 1916. What they gave for our country was unbelievable. When war was over, he still wanted to be in the Navy after all his trials and the tribulations he had, and he continued his Navy career, and he retired as Rear Admiral in 1932. We have a famous ship berthed in Belfast, the Caroline, and it fought in many of these battles, and it's the only existing ship now that's serviceable, and you can go and visit, and it's well worth a visit. I have visited a number of occasions, and it's very interesting. So if you get a chance, you and your family go and visit this famous ship that's not too far away from you. This really is the end of my little talk outside here. But in recent days, I picked up this. This is a gas mask. Unlike the gas mask that we normally see that adults and older people would have during the gas attacks during the war, this is for a baby or young child. The baby would have been placed, or the young child would have been placed up in it. There's a visor here that the people can look at it, and it would have been sealed off, and then we have the breathing part of it here. That would have been very harrowing for the families that had to put their baby or their child in during a very serious attack by gas. So this is just one of my new artifacts that I've picked up. So it'll be stored as well and kept, and it'll be passed on. So thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm going to show a short video now, it's about 11 minutes I think, of a young man, not much older than some of the boys within our company, and in fact younger than some of the boys in our company, who went to war. So and then we shall have a little snippet from when the boys paraded at the Menin Gate in Ypres, followed by the buglers playing Last Post on Valley with a 2-minute silence, again taken from the Menin Gate, before finishing off with the great hymn, How Great Thou Art. And it always brings tears to my eyes when I'm at the Royal Albert Hall and this is sung. And you see those young men and those young women from the armed forces singing their hearts out, How Great Thou Art. Thank you for taking the time to listen, to thank the boys, thank the parents, thank the friends, and those others who have joined with us. And I hope you've learned something this evening. We hope also to have a couple of boys reading poems, and we hope to have boys laying a wreath at the White Abbey Memorial, close to Remembrance, and at Knocker Memorial as well. And I've been asked by the British Legion to lay a wreath at the Glengormley Memorial on Wednesday 11th on behalf of the Boys Brigade, and I take that as a privilege. So thank you for taking the time to join with us, and I hope everyone keeps well during these very trying times. Thank you.
Poppy, Poppy, what do you say? Wear me on Remembrance Day. Poppy, Poppy, what do you tell? Many soldiers in the battle fell. Poppy, Poppy, what should we know? That peace on earth should grow, grow, grow.
Taking a Stand by John Bailey, 2009. I ask you to stand with me for both the injured and the lost. I ask you to keep count with me of all the wars and what they cost. I ask you to be silent with me, quietly grateful for our lot, as I expect you are as grateful as me for the health and life we've got. I ask that you wish them well with me, all of those still risking their all, and I ask that you remember with me the names of those that fall. I expect that you are proud like me of this great nation of ours too, so enjoying all its freedoms like me, support those upholding them for you. I hope that you are hopeful like me, that we'll soon bring an end to wars, so you'll have to stand no more with me, and mourning families no different from yours. Till then, be thankful you can stand with me, thinking of those who now cannot. For standing here today with me, at least we know they're not forgot.
We shall keep the faith. Oh, you who sleep in Flanders fields, sleep sweet to rise anew. We caught the torch you threw, and holding high we keep the faith with all who died. We cherish too the poppy red that grows on fields where valour led. It seems to signal to the skies the blood of heroes never dies, but lends a lustre to the red of the flower that blooms above the dead in Flanders fields. And now the torch and poppy red we wear in honour of our dead. Fear not that ye have died for naught, we'll teach the lessons that ye wrought in Flanders fields.
There is a tiny cemetery some 10 kilometres east of Bayeux that is, perhaps, the most meaningful place in the world for some. It holds a sadness that screws you up inside.
I were only 8 years old in 1944 when he were killed. The last memory I have of him is when he came home on leave and took me and my brothers for a walk on moors over Darwin. Jack loved walking. When I were too tired, he carried me on his shoulders. On the way back, we called at Grandad Banks's chippy.
4 bags of best chips, please, Grandad. Plenty of salt and vinegar for us lads, but not for our Jeannie.
Jack Banks was the oldest of 5 children, born in 1928 in Darwin, Lancashire. Like many of Lancashire's towns, Darwin was reliant on the cotton industry, and at the beginning of the 20th century, there were some 63 cotton mills in the town. Jack's dad worked in one of these, but Jack had other ideas for himself, which he never stopped talking about.
I don't care that I'm not old enough. All I want to do is join Thormy. We've been at war now for 4 years. I want to do me bit. I've proved myself already in Thorm Gar with all them certificates for shooting. Bet them men twice me age.
Jack was indeed known to be a crack shot. It was also clear that he was absolutely determined to enlist as a soldier, even though he was more than 2 years under age. His family could do nothing to dissuade him.
We did our best to stop him, but it were army Jack wanted. He'd not have liked it if Mum and Dad had given him away.
It was a decision that would haunt their hearts for the rest of their days. Still only 15, but tall for his age, Jack claimed to be 18 and joined the 8th Battalion Durham Light Infantry.
Mum promised that if he were posted overseas, she would tell his age to authorities and that would surely prevent him from going.
In June 1944, the Allies finally launched their campaign to liberate Western Europe. The plan was known as Operation Overlord and was to involve 3 million servicemen and women. The build-up to D-Day had to be shrouded in secrecy, or the element of surprise would be lost. So it was that Jack's parents, at home in Darwin, were reasonably content in the belief that their beloved son was training in Aldershot, when in fact he was already on his way to his death in France.
At 11:30 hours on D-Day, the 8th Battalion Durham Light Infantry landed on Gold Beach to the west of La Riviere.
My stomach were churning and churning, and I didn't know whether it were being seasick, excited, or scared stiff. I wouldn't have let on even if I were terrified to bits. I just remember being soaked to skin like a drowned rat as I tried to get to shore, and struggling to carry all the equipment which dragged me down under waves. Wouldn't have let go of it though.
For those who survived the onslaught of D-Day, there was little movement towards Bayeux throughout June and early July, with many casualties from sniper fire. Any houses still standing were booby-trapped and attracted artillery fire from the enemy, so were bivouacked in slit trenches, only about 35 yards from the enemy line.
We've had no bread since we landed. I never thought I could get sick of biscuits, margarine and jam, but I reckon anyone would if they had to eat nothing else for 6 weeks or more. The worst thing is the smell of rotten cows, killed weeks ago by mortar fire. All the way to France to fight for king and country, and we're done in by that. It's too dangerous to clear them away, and the stench and the flies get worse by the minute. You don't think of cows as being casualties of war.
July 21st, Chouain, Normandy. A few hundred yards to our right, you'll see there's a farmhouse. I need 3 volunteers to take out the machine gun post with grenades. Good lad, Banks.
Jack and 2 other men were hit by mortar fire. Jack was seriously wounded in the thigh and taken to a field ambulance. The others died instantly.
I think I've had it, sir.
Don't be silly, lad. We'll get you home all right.
Jack died shortly afterwards, on July the 21st, 1944. He was just 16 years old.
It was the job of a soldier to fight the enemy at the risk of his life, sometimes at close quarters. Him or you, kill or be killed. It was my job as chaplain to collect up the bodies of the men who'd been killed, both friend and foe, to take the identity disc from around their neck, to fish out personal effects from their pockets, to remove a ring from a finger. if it would still come off, and to put what I could retrieve in a little plastic bag. Then came the grisly business of wrapping the remains in an army blanket, a harrowing job which taught me never again to be squeamish. And after that, getting men to dig the graves in some quiet spot that could be identified by a map reference, and giving them as dignified and honourable a funeral as could be managed. They all, friend and foe, had been faithful unto death, and deserved all the care that I could give. When I wrote the letters home, I realised that I was breaking the news of the death of someone dearly beloved. It was the hardest and most painful part of the job, and I had to develop a thick skin to survive so much emotion every day. Dear Mr. Banks, I'm afraid this letter is bringing you some very sad news. Your son was mortally wounded and died in the field ambulance. He has been buried with 2 other men, and a white cross has been erected. The graves are being well cared for. It must be a great blow for you, I'm afraid, but you have the pride of knowing that he gave all he had. No man can do more. May God give you strength to face the future bravely.
I remember Mam collapsed when she read it. Things were never same after that. She had never claimed his medals. It was too upsetting. She wanted him back, not those. She was so sure that she could bring Jack's body home that she had a black vase engraved for his grave. It stood on her sideboard until her death in 1980, and every week she would fill it with fresh flowers in his memory.
Jack Banks was buried at Little Jerusalem Cemetery, near Chouin. When things had settled down after the war, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission gave him and all the other soldiers buried there a proper headstone. The family chose their own inscription. God will tell us why someday he broke our hearts and took you away. 10 years later, his family was able to visit him. In a green corner of a foreign field that seemed so like England, his mum shed the tears that she'd kept back since the day she heard that Jack had died. She couldn't say in words what that day meant to her.
At intervals down the years, I have returned to the cemetery with surviving colleagues of my regimental association, and we are invariably asked to attend the simple act of remembrance by the villagers of Chouin, who, through the decades, have looked upon the tiny graveyard as their own. The village band exhausts itself with spirited trumpetings. Our president, bareheaded, reads aloud his oration in stumbling French, and a line of school children with reproachful faces lay their bunches of wild flowers as if admonishment to an earlier generation for its glory and its shame. We, who have been spared to grow old, see the flowers, the silent stones, the names, the regiments, the youthful ages, preserved for eternity. Externally, we are balding, aged veterans of a war more than half a century past. But in our ears rise the sound of churning tank tracks in the night, and Spandau bullets swishing through the corn.
How pleasant is the winter night. I feel some drops of rain. I never had but one true love. In Greenwood he lies slain. I'll do so much for my true love as any young girl may. I'll sit and mourn all 12 months and a day. The 12 months